Number 6. The UK's nuclear submarines. Since 1980, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence has decommissioned 20 nuclear submarines. In accordance with standard protocol, they were put into long-term storage with plans to monitor them until the engineers got started with the defueling and dismantling processes. More than 40 years later, however, the vessels continue to languish at dockyards in Fife, Scotland and Plymouth, England, with a somewhat uncertain future. In 2021, the MOD announced its Submarine Dismantling Project, or SDP for short, which will focus on dismantling the 20 submarines that have already been retired. 7 others that are still in service but will be decommissioned in the near future will also be disassembled. Carrying out this plan will not only take years, it will also come with an estimated price tag of more than $9 billion. For now, the subs will continue to undergo routine maintenance to ensure that they pose no environmental or public safety threats. The first step for the SDP will be for the radioactive fuel to be removed from each submarine and transported to a nuclear waste management facility. This part of the process will require each sub to be moved into a specialized reactor access house where the fuel rods will be cooled to prevent them from generating dangerous amounts of heat. A 3-stage approach to dismantling each submarine will follow. To start, the less hazardous parts of each nuclear core will be removed, followed by the intermediately dangerous reactor pressure vessel. Components that can be reused will be implemented into operational vehicles. After clearing out radioactive parts and waste, the non-radioactive materials will be repurposed or recycled at a licensed shipbreaking property. In 2023, the MOD announced that the HMF Swiftsure will be the first submarine to undergo the dismantling process, acting as a test case for the project's future. Contracts for the job will be awarded later on in the year. Number 5. The NS Savannah. At first glance, the nearly 600-foot-long NS Savannah seems pretty ordinary, but she's one of the most unique American ships ever made. Built in New Jersey during the late 1950s as part of President Dwight Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace initiative, the Savannah was the first ever nuclear-powered merchant ship. In a nutshell, the Cold War-era government-funded vessel was meant to demonstrate one of the ways that nuclear power could be used for peaceful purposes. One of just 4 nuclear-powered cargo ships ever built, the Savannah also briefly operated as a passenger vessel, complete with 30 staterooms, several lounges, a bar, a 75-seat dining room, a swimming pool, and more. The vessel's decor could be best described as an absurd combination of vintage and futuristic items, featuring atomic and chemistry-themed sculptures, light fixtures, wall hangings, and even diningware. There's also geometric, brightly colored furniture and illuminated glass tabletops. Sadly, passenger service only lasted for 3 years before being discontinued in 1965, and in total, only 848 civilians ever traveled on the Savannah. The Savannah continued operating as a cargo ship until 1970. It was defueled the following year, but the ship has yet to be fully decommissioned even now, 50 years later. After being taken out of service and moved several times, the Savannah ended up at its current home in Baltimore, Maryland. It's reportedly open to visitors for free tours every May around National Maritime Day, but otherwise, it's closed to the public. There's been talk about turning the vessel into a museum ship, but this has never happened due to a lack of funding. A plan put forth by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission proposes a multi-step program that is slated to take place over a 7-year span. The program appears to be in its second phase, which involves the actual dismantling of the ship. This is being carried out by a contracted joint venture between 2 private companies, Control Services Inc. and Energy Solutions and Radiation Safety. As of fall 2022, the ship's reactor pressure vessel has been safely removed. 3 months later, it arrived by rail at a low-level radioactive waste disposal facility in Clive, Utah. At the moment, the project is ongoing. In a statement, the companies carrying out the work stated that their goal is to safely and surgically decommission the ship, maintaining maximum ship integrity to preserve this national historic landmark. For the time being, the Savannah's future remains to be seen. Number 4. The Ship Submarine Recycling Program. Before a nuclear United States Navy vessel is decommissioned, it must first undergo the defueling process. Spent nuclear fuel is transported by rail to the Naval Reactor Facility at the Idaho National Laboratory outside Idaho Falls, where it's put into special canisters and placed into storage. During the defueling process, any reusable nuclear parts are also removed and repurposed. After being defueled, retired nuclear vessels enter the Ship Submarine Recycling Program, or SRP, at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Bremerton, Washington. While pre-dismantling preparations can be done elsewhere, this is currently the only location in the U.S. where the SRP program is carried out. The first step of dismantling a defueled nuclear submarine involves cutting it into 3 or 4 large pieces. In most cases, the pieces consist of the vessel's aft section, the reactor compartment, the missile compartment, if it has one, and the forward section. Missile compartments undergo their own specialized dismantling process in accordance with the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which was signed on July 31, 1991. Until then, the forward and aft sections were typically rejoined and placed into floating storage. In more recent years, these sections have been recycled, with any hazardous and toxic materials being removed in the process. Any reusable non-nuclear parts are inventoried, while remaining metal and other materials are reused or sold to private companies. The defueled reactor compartment is then sealed at both ends and shipped to the Department of Energy's Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Washington, where it's put into dry storage with plans to eventually be buried. One of the vessels to undergo the SRP process was the USS James K. Polk, a Benjamin Franklin-class ballistic missile submarine that entered service in the mid-1960s. Throughout her more than 30-year career, the sub embarked on numerous strategic deterrent patrols throughout the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. In 1992, the James K. Polk was converted into an attack submarine. As part of the process, its ballistic missiles were removed and its missile tubes were deactivated. The sub was also deactivated in early 1999 and was transported from Norfolk, Virginia to the SRP facility at Puget Sound where the decommissioning process commenced. The scrapping of the vehicle was completed in April of 2000. Today, the vessel's sail is on display at the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Dismantling a nuclear submarine is unavoidably expensive, coming at a cost of $25 to $50 million per vehicle. But the SRP makes the process as cost-efficient as possible. However, a backlog of vessels awaiting dismantlement has led the Navy to consider alternative methods of disposal, especially when it comes to some of its larger and more complicated ships. Do you think it would be more beneficial in the long run for a country to go into debt in order to dispose of their nuclear waste property? Or at this point, do you think it's a waste of time? Let us know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 3, the world's largest nuclear ship. In April of 2023, the Russian state-sponsored media agency TASS announced that the country's military may have no choice but to scrap the battlecruiser Pyotr Veliki. At 827 feet long, it's the world's largest nuclear-powered ship. Built during the mid-1990s, the Pyotr Veliki, or Peter the Great, is the designated flagship of the Northern Fleet. But the cost of maintenance and modernization were recently deemed too high as part of Moscow's ongoing effort to restructure its navy. No official announcement has been made, but it appears as though the Pyotr Veliki will most likely be replaced by her sister ship, the non-nuclear cruiser Admiral Nakhimov, which is currently undergoing repairs and upgrades. The cost of overhauling the Admiral Nakhimov is reportedly what led officials to conclude putting the Pyotr Veliki through the same process would be way too expensive. Media reports have speculated that the Nakhimov will be given to the Northern Fleet sometime in 2024. The Pyotr Veliki is the Navy's only combat surface nuclear-powered ship. It's part of a subset of naval warfare vessels that were designed for battle on the water surface, equipped with their own weapons and armed forces. Given Russia's notoriously secretive nature, its history of mishandling nuclear waste, and its concerning backlog of nuclear vessels that are already waiting to be decommissioned and dismantled, the Pyotr Veliki will most likely enter storage after being taken out of service. Hopefully, though, the ship will undergo at least the bare minimum amount of maintenance required to prevent it from being an environmental hazard. It's clear that Russia has bitten off more than it can chew when it comes to the disposal of nuclear waste. So do you think it would be appropriate for the international community to impose a ban against the country building even more nuclear-powered vehicles until it figures out how to safely get rid of the ones it has? Let us know in the comments below. Number 2, the USS Enterprise. The former USS Enterprise, also known as CVN-65, became the U.S. Navy's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in 1958. At 1,123 feet long, she's also the longest naval vessel ever built. Constructing the ship came at an immense cost of $451.3 million, roughly the equivalent of $4.35 billion in 2021 due to inflation. Disposing of the Enterprise will also be extremely expensive, not to mention time-consuming. The gargantuan vessel was deactivated in 2012 and became the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to be decommissioned in early 2017. In 2013, the ship was towed from Norfolk to Newport News, Virginia, where the defueling process began. Since then, more than 35,000 pounds of steel has been removed from the previous Enterprise and repurposed for the future Enterprise aircraft carrier, also known as CVN-80. CVN-65's final nuclear reactor was defueled in 2016, but the ship has yet to be fully dismantled. For now, the recycling process is on hold while the Navy seeks a more technically executable, environmentally responsible disposal method for the retired aircraft carrier. In 2022, the military announced its tentative plans to contract with a commercial dismantlement facility due to the heavy workload at Puget Sound, where numerous decommissioned nuclear vessels are already awaiting dismantlement. According to a draft report, the quickest route will still take at least 5 years and will cost an estimated $554 to $696 million. The two alternatives listed in the report would each take at least 15 years and come at a cost of $1.1 to $1.35 billion. The Navy is also reportedly considering a no-action alternative, which means that the Enterprise would be put into long-term storage while officials try to come up with a more definitive future for it. Number 1. Russia's nuclear submarines. When the United States and the Soviet Union were entangled in the infamous Cold War arms race, it's unclear whether either superpower was thinking about how they one day safely dispose of outdated nuclear weapons and vehicles. In the post-Cold War era, both America and Russia have discovered just how complicated, time-consuming, and expensive this task truly is, especially when it comes to retired nuclear submarines and ships. Even in the US, where a detailed program and funding are both securely in place, but Russia lacks both a comprehensive plan and the money to properly dispose of its nuclear-powered naval vessels. It's also highly questionable whether the country has the financial resources to maintain these vehicles to prevent them from posing an environmental hazard while they languish in storage with uncertain futures. Of the 244 nuclear submarines the Soviet Union produced during the Cold War, 180 have been taken out of service. Simply put, the government couldn't afford to keep them operational. But Russia's current system for disposing of nuclear submarines can only dismantle between 3 and 6 vehicles per year, resulting in a horrendous backlog that only seems to be getting more burdensome as the fleet continues to age. In the past, the Soviet Union dumped reactor coolant and other low-level liquid radioactive wastes into the sea, but this practice was forbidden in 1972 by the London Dumping Convention, and modern Russian leaders promised to abide by the terms of the agreement, which also prohibits scuttling nuclear vessels. To make matters even more complicated, it's clear that past Soviet leaders didn't plan for the Cold War to end peacefully, or for the USSR to go broke like it did. But Russia has nowhere to store liquid waste or spent fuel. The 110 or so of its decommissioned submarines that still have operating nuclear reactors are currently manned by skeleton crews. As experts James Clay Moltz and Tamara C. Robinson have pointed out, a country's failure to properly dispose of its military hardware may have once been considered a problem for that country. But when it comes to nuclear materials and the dangers they pose, it's a different story. In other words, Russia's problem is a concern to the international community at large, and the inevitable solution will involve providing Russia with an influx of financial assistance. But one of the last things American leaders are keen to do is hand over money to Russia, especially amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Simply put, the future of Russia's retired nuclear vessels remains to be seen. Do you think the United States should offer help to Russia to cover the costs of properly disposing of its nuclear submarines? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.